Hey there, Suzi here. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share this special message with you. Now, my co-host Michelle and I love masterminds. Not only do we belong to masterminds, but we also host a mastermind. We started it almost 8 years ago, and it is the premier mastermind for women business owners who want to grow their business with a specific focus on marketing. Now, this group is usually completely booked out, and very occasionally we open the doors and invite a handful of women in. So if you're growing your business, but you're struggling with feeling overwhelmed, or like you constantly have a split focus when it comes to your marketing, this could be exactly what you're looking for. We have an amazing time together, and the women in the group are extraordinary. They're great cheerleaders, supporters, advisors, and colleagues for you. And they're also seeing extraordinary results. We see people cracking the $1 million, $2 million, $3 million mark, launching new e-commerce sites that go from $0 to $10,000 a month in sales. They're doubling their conversion rates, they're growing memberships, they're selling courses, they're growing their personal brands, and they're getting all kinds of media exposure and speaking opportunities and so much more. You can learn more about the mastermind and join the wait list over at herbusinessmastermind.com. We're going to open the doors soon, so you definitely want to be on the list to get an invitation. So head on over to herbusinessmastermind.com. Hi, you're listening to the Content Sells Podcast, a show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 226. I'm Suzi Dafnis, and here with me is my co-host, Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I love that. Hey, Suzi. I'm doing really, really well. Importantly, though, I need to know, how are you? I know you are literally back from an incredible, amazing trip.
Yes, I'm still very much holding on to my post-travel bliss, even though a lot has happened in the last couple of weeks. PJ and I had a trip to Egypt, somewhere where I had been in my 20s. I was broke and backpacking with a couple of girlfriends, and I got the chance to revisit the beautiful country of Egypt with a group of entrepreneurs, which was fascinating in itself. And so 2023 was a big year of travel for me and PJ, and 2024 will be as well. But finishing the year off with a trip to Egypt was just magical. The wonder of the country filled my heart. The fabulous food filled my belly every single day. It was just wonderful. I mean, you and I both love travel, and it was just a very, very special time, and that I'm still very much in my heart.
Oh, well, just seeing the pics, and I know they are just not a patch on the actual experience you had. It was just truly, it looked like the trip of a lifetime. Everything just looked so incredible. And it is a place I want to go. I tried to get there a few years ago, and we had to change our plans due to a few other things, and it's back on the list. We're like, oh my gosh, it's back on the list.
We are the new ambassadors.
Yes. And I do. I just love also that you're back from the place that is so historic in terms of our human history of writing things down, and here we are recording our annual episode on our book recommendations for content marketers. It's so mind-blowing, really, when I think about it, that we've developed language and systems for recording that language in the written word. We sort of just take all of this for granted, these thousands of years of human evolution and thought. We get to pick up a book now and read complex thoughts. But when you really look at what that is, it's such a privilege. And it is so incredible that I can have a thought in my brain and I have some words to translate those thoughts into that I can write with scribbles that you can understand. I mean, it's just wow when you really look at that. And, for me, and I know for you too, reading what others have written, having the benefit of language and the benefit of reading other people's beautiful words has been one of the greatest joys in my life, really, ever since I was a little girl.
And same for me. And whether that is, literature, whether it's biographies, whether it's, Egyptian hieroglyphics that tell the story of the pharaohs, our ability to learn and grow and understand story through what has been written is really, really quite a marvel, and in so many languages. And of course, having just been in Egypt, seeing a lot of Egyptian hieroglyphics, and they are generally considered some of the earliest true writing systems. He's actually carving things out, carving pictures and words out onto rock, and then going to papyrus. And like, this is thousands and thousands of years ago. So this isn't just Egyptian history. This is world history, of how we started to, and of course, Australia has great history and written stories as well. But in Egypt, not only do we see a lot of papyrus and old papyrus, literally from thousands of years ago, there was a place at the bottom of Mount Sinai, which is one of the mountains that we climbed, where there's a over 2,000-year-old church, this Church of St. Catherine. And inside, Michelle, were these Bibles that were handwritten. And they're like thousands of years old, and it's all written on cotton and papyrus. It's so, so amazing. Yeah, just treasures. And, words and writing are just such a big part of how we learn. And as marketers, we're putting words out there all the time for people to consume now and well into the future. Today's episode, as you mentioned, is our recommended books. And it's also one of my favorite episodes. While it's simple in its structure, and that we're going to give you some of the things that we've been reading this year that we think are a great addition to your book list, we also get to update our Content Sales recommended reading list, which we've been putting out for a number of years. And it's one of our most popular downloads. And I'm going to tell you where you can get a copy a little later in the show. And in that, you're going to see not only the books that we recommend here today, but all our marketing book recommendations. It's something we like to keep totally up to date. For now, though, let's dive on into our recommendations. I am going to kick things off here. And this is a book I've personally loved. In fact, Michelle, we loved it so much that we recently gave a copy of the book to each of our masterminders. Michelle and I have the Her Business Marketing Success Mastermind that we co-present. And every now and then, a number of times a year actually, we like to give our masterminders books. And so the one I'm about to mention is our most recent gift to our masterminders.
Yeah, we absolutely did. And I know already what a huge impact it's had on them. Really looking forward to hearing you share more on this book. What is it?
Yeah, they're loving it. They're loving it. Just as I did when I first read it. The book is called Buy Back Your Time, and the author is Dan Martell. He's a very successful SaaS software entrepreneur, but this book is not about that. It's actually about entrepreneurship and buying back your time. So the way this book came into my existence, into my mind, is that I belong to a mastermind similar to what we run, but it's a mastermind that I travel to the US or Canada to 3 times a year. And often we'll have a guest speaker. And the guest speaker on this occasion, I think it was January January 2023, was Dan Martell. Now, he presented on the book, and I immediately fell in love with the messages. There's a couple of lines in the book that I want to share with you now because they were kind of like, yes, that's so true. So the idea of the book is that you want to buy back your time as a business owner, right? We start a business, we get in the weeds, we're doing all the things, but the way that we can be truly successful and have the lives we want is to buy back our time, right? Rather than doing all the things, doing the things that are the things that we as business owners ought to be doing in order to grow the business. And so he says a couple of things. One, he says, we don't hire to grow, we hire to buy back our time. What does that even mean? That means that when you're thinking of bringing on a new team member, think about how is that going to give you back more of your time. And he has this ladder of prioritization of what roles you should be filling in what order in order to get yourself out of the doingness, out of the administration, out of the management, out of the delivery of your products and services, eventually into the more strategic part of the business. And as women growing and scaling businesses, this is something that really resonated. The other thing that he says, because we can be so attached to what we do and having it be perfect and we're the best one for the job, that we don't leverage ourselves enough. And he has this saying that 80% done by someone else is 100% awesome. And that's been a real mind shift for me because I have a high level of excellence, as I'm sure you do as you're listening. But what if someone could get that task 80% of the way to being done and you didn't have to do it?
And maybe you did the final 20% until they were capable of doing it 100%. That's kind of what it's about. He also talks about, well, who do you hire first if you're just starting out? And even if you have team members, I would really look at this chapter, because likely there's a gap that you are still filling. You are still stretching yourself to do all the things, whereas bringing in this one role could leverage you so much. And who you hire first does depend a little bit of where you are in your business. And he has this great, diagrams and lots of different processes in the book for helping get you out of the administration or the delivery or the management or the marketing, whatever it is that's going to elevate you to a higher level in your business. Because how you use your time can really make or break your success as a business owner. And what he says about the secret to success is that it's not about working harder or finding more time to do work, right? That's a false belief. It's about designing the freedom to engage only in high value work that brings you energy and fulfillment. And we've all heard the term about trading our time for money, and that's a real rabbit hole. That's a real hamster wheel. Trading our time for money. Instead, he says, how do you trade your money for time? So how do you actually buy back your time and free space in your calendar to allow you the time to create real success, more than you've ever dreamed of? As I said, we gave this book to our mastermind members at our last meeting. We meet 4 times a year, and they're absolutely loving it. And one of the comments that I wanted to share was from the lovely Tracy Bode, who has a wonderful e-commerce business where she helps people with disabilities connect with the right technology to give them freedom and the ability to communicate. And one of the things that Dan Martell talks about is creating your ideal day. So he not only gives you practical tips, but he goes into the bigger picture of, we're in business to create lives that we love. And so Tracy said this, she said, I've always had a concept of my ideal day with time and space for my morning yoga, journaling, and meditation. But I couldn't see quite how to make it work with my ideal CEO role until page 27 in the book. She said, I now have my Oprah days scheduled for 1 week a month next year. Takeaway of a lifetime. Now, let me give you a quick synopsis of an Oprah day. One of the stories that Dan shares is what has been published as Oprah's typical day. And when you see it, and as Tracy's told us, it comes in at about page 27, it talks about the strategic work that she does on a daily basis and what is taken care of by other people. And so Tracy has cottoned onto this idea, really latched onto this idea of her Oprah days. And as you've heard her say, she's scheduled 1 week per month this year to have her Oprah days. And what that means is she's stepping into her CEO role at a mega way for 1 week every single month. And I know that commitment is going to be a huge transformation of her buying back her time. Michelle, anything you want to add about this book?
Oh my gosh. I mean, you've given such a fantastic sense of the book, and I just encourage people to read it. I love the book also, and I love how practical all the tips are. And I do just that point that Tracy pulled out of the book, I love you mentioned that, because every book can contain just one idea that can be life-changing. Even if you don't implement everything, there is at least one idea in this book that will change your life. And I especially loved the 10-80-10 rule that he talked about. And you kind of alluded to it there where, 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome. And I think as content marketers, as business owners, we can cling to tasks that we think other people can't do. And the real genius in this 10-80-10 rule that I love is that he says you start the project, you engage in the project, the first 10%. 10% where you take the person who's going to implement this project for you and you download to them all the things, the nuances, your ideas, you chat to them, you brief them, you bring your best self into the start of the project. And then that person goes and runs with it for 80% of the project. And they just come back to you for the last 10%, 10, 80, 10. And in that last 10%, you can say, hey, that's great. Let's move these columns around, or let's do this or that. It is such a simple thing, but so practical in terms of how you can get the most out of your team, but still have your own flavor. If you are the expert in your business, if you are the genius in your business, let's just call a spade a spade. Sometimes other people are going to create content that isn't what you would want to put out there. this process means you just put in that 10% at the start, the 10% at the end. Somebody does all of the other piece and you get the great quality as well. And it's 80% done by somebody else. That's 100% awesome. I love it. So I just think that book is such a practical book, Suzi, and I've actually gone back to a few classics in the choices that I'm making, and I want to highlight one of them. Actually, two of them. One was published in 2007, and one was published in 2012. So they're not yesterday's books, like they're not books that were just recently published, and they're also not 1950s books either. But while there's lots of new books being released. And, obviously Buy Back Your Time is right up there, I think, with some of the best, most recent books that have been released. I found myself going back to one book in particular this year, and it was the one published back in 2007. And when I thought about that, Suzi, that is well before this podcast started, and it's actually around the time that you and I first met.
So what is that, 15, 16 years? What? Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I know, right? And so, I don't know, that just makes me feel a little, I don't know, melancholy or something. Not melancholy, what's the word when you're looking back over something? Sentimental. This book kind of was born the year that we met. So this book is a New York Times bestseller. And when it came out, it really did become a bit of an instant classic, because what it does so beautifully is it puts its finger right on something really so important that I don't think had been really named or looked at closely the way that these authors have. It asks the question, why do some ideas thrive while others die? It's a simple question, but it has a very complex, thorough kind of exploration associated with it. How do we create ideas, messages, communication, products that people remember and want to share and talk about? And if anybody here has had any experience creating any content for any other human, you will know getting people to remember what we're talking about, standing out, being memorable, being heard, having an idea that others want to share with other people, that is not easy. And so this book is all about that. And the book is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And this, I just feel reverent when I say that name of the book and the name of these writers. I hold them in such esteem. And Suzi, we've featured another one of their books, The Power of Moments, which I know is one of your picks in a previous episode. And you've actually gifted that book to all the people in your Her Business Network.
Yeah, I love their books, and I'm just kind of surprised that we've never featured this one on our recommended books episodes before. And I agree, it's as relevant today as it ever was. I know that we recommend it at different times because it is one of those classics, as you said, but, has been the whole time. And it's relevant today because we're seeing more and more ideas, both good and bad, flood the market, especially with AI created content. Again, some of it's good. A lot of it is really, really bad. And so, but this idea of, there is something different about things that stand the test of time and things that die. And this book, I agree. It's definitely one for this list.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it has actually been on our recommended reading list for some time. We've just never featured it as one of our featured books. So I was like, what? Really? We're going to talk about this. So I 100% agree with you, though. I think, bringing it into the present moment, as you did there, speaking about AI, speaking about, we've got a lot of fake news out there. We've got a lot of information that's scattered and fragmented and getting more and more scattered and fragmented. So I really do think right now is the time to read this book if you haven't already. And it's also the time to revisit this book if you've read it before. So, for all the reasons you're talking about, Suzi, because we are living in an age that is saturated with messaging, but it seems so few people are actually saying anything worth paying attention to. And even less are saying things that we remember. We've got less than 24-hour news cycles. We've got 7-second TikTok videos. We've got images. Like I look at images now in my Instagram feed, Suzi, and I think, oh, what a beautiful house. And then I think, hang on, I think that's AI.
Is it real?
No, I was marveling at this incredible insect the other day, thinking, my goodness, isn't nature amazing? And then I was like, hang on, this is AI generated, right? So, we're on unsteady ground. Most ideas just don't survive. They don't cut through. We've got less and less trust, I think, around the ideas that are being shared. So in some ways, it's harder than ever before to have our ideas heard and remembered. But I'm not going to be a downer on this because Chip and Dan Heath are here to help us. And I also believe when you know what Chip and Dan Heath share in this book, you've actually got an almost unprecedented opportunity to create messages that people love, to build a community of people who love what you do, who pay attention when you share content, who listen when you speak, who are this vibrant community, who want to share your ideas, who want to follow you online, who are willing to pay to learn more from you or to use your products and services, because so few people are saying nothing. The people that can figure out how to say something that sticks, I think that is the game to win this coming year. And at the heart of the book is this notion that an idea must be what they call sticky, just like the title suggests, made to stick. And they actually spent 10 years researching what makes ideas sticky. And of course, a sticky idea is one that is made to stick in the minds of people who hear it. It is something that's understandable and memorable and actually changes perspective or behavior. And that's really at the core of what we as marketers and communicators are all about. So along with some incredible examples of sticky ideas, like they do a great job taking their concepts and applying them to the real world. So I highly suggest you read the book for those examples that will make these concepts real. They identified 6 principles to identify and create sticky ideas. And I'm just going to rattle off the 6 principles. I'm not expecting this to stick with you because I'm not putting it in the right context. I just want you to get a feel for it. Go and read the book and see how they get these ideas to stick. And first off, they use an acronym, which is one of their strategies, one of many strategies for having ideas that stick. And the acronym is SUCCESS. SUCCESS. They kind of cheat because there's only one S on the end of this acronym. But the first S is simplicity. And it's all about finding the core of what it is you want to talk about, the essential essence of your message. So this is a really interesting idea, simplicity. It's not simplistic. It's not just about using fewer words or shorter sound bites. According to Chip and Dan, they say it is about finding the essential core of our ideas and sharing it in the form of a compact idea. Now, this takes time. And it's this time that most people are not investing in their content right now. We've seen media have all of their journalists fired. We've got, I was reading the Sydney Morning Herald and there were typos on the homepage.
What?
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Journalism is getting under so much pressure right now. Budgets are being cut. We're seeing a lack of time to create ideas that stick. And so if you can do this, you will absolutely be seen and heard. And so instead of rambly, hard to understand content, they give a ton of ideas for embedding a lot of meaning in a simple way, including one of my favorite things to do, which is to offer an analogy. If you're explaining a complex concept, what's something else that the reader or the viewer will understand that you can map that concept to? And this is a go-to move. Since I've read this book, I just do this over and over again. Unexpectedness, getting and retaining attention. So how do we get attention and how do we keep people's attention? Concreteness. How do we make things clear? How do we make them real? How do we take the abstract and make it something tangible for people? Credibility is the next C, making our ideas believable. How do we help people to see that we aren't AI generated? We are fully researched. We are the real deal. And they both give you some incredible tactics and techniques for that, including one of my favorites, the Sinatra test. And you've got to read the book to find out what that is. E, success. So SUCCE. The E is for emotions, getting people to care. For somebody to take action, first they have to care. And there are several techniques in the book for helping people to care. And this in itself, this one section is a game changer. If you can get people to care, you will get them to act. And if you can get them to act, then they're opting in for your lead magnet. They're signing up for your webinar. They're buying your thing. And then finally, the S is for stories. And they do a lot about stories to get people taking action. It is such a good book. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Go read it.
I love it. And I've got it on Audible as well, but it's been years, right? So I'm going to tap back into it. Thank you for the reminder. So that's two of our recommendations. The next book I want to talk about is one called $100 Million Leads, How to Get Strangers to Want to Buy Your Stuff. And it's by Alex Hormozi. Now, the author is someone whose name, I know, Michelle, you've known his name for years as well. I've never studied with him before. I hadn't read anything until this year. I've read two of his books this year. But he kept popping up, and he kept popping up in conversations with people with whom I'm in a mastermind. I started to follow him on social media, and he's a really interesting dude, and I say dude very specifically. He's a really blokey bloke, and really a guy's guy. You know, he puts out a lot of content. He's really easy to follow. I would check him out on YouTube and on Instagram, and he puts out a lot of bite-sized tips. So a few months ago, the way I came across this book was he was actually teasing the launch of the book, something he did really, really well. And so I wanted to feature this particular book because just even in seeing him release the book was an excellent example of making the most of a great runway, something we've talked about here on the show. So the book is called $100 Million Leads, and it contains what he calls playbooks that took him from sleeping on his gym floor. So he's in the fitness business. So sleeping on his gym floor to having a portfolio of companies across all sorts of areas that generate $200 million a year. And he did that in a decade. So he tells that story in this book, but he also gives you really practical things that you can do to generate leads. So the problem that he said is that most business owners don't know how to get leads. And Michelle and I both know that to be true. And I know it's something that we've struggled with over the years as well, and something we continue to work on every single day. But in the book, he gives you really practical advice on even how to advertise in order to generate leads, and not just any leads, but actually engaged leads. And he makes that distinction. And he says in the book, and I really believe this to be true, he says when you double your leads, you double your business. And so he shows you how to make your leads more engaged. He gives you a step-by-step process on what to do with those leads when their interest is at its high, at the peak. And so if you're on a pathway to generate a whole lot more leads this year, I highly recommend you grab a copy of the book, either in print or on audio. He gives you great ideas on lead magnets and how to get people to buy. He even goes behind the scenes of how he named his book. Now, if you think about the book name, $100 Million Leads, How to Get Strangers to Buy What You Sell, Buy Your Stuff, sorry. Like, he's got a really great title, but he didn't land on that right away, and he takes you through that process. So much to learn. Get the book.
that would be what Suzi would write on the book cover. So much to learn, get the book. Suzi Dafnis. He's definitely got some things figured out. And yeah, blokey bloke for sure, but we can learn from everybody, right? And so I found he is so clever. He really did break the internet with the launch of that book. Over 500,000 people attended his book launch for $100 million leads, and he did $4.4 million in book sales. That's book sales. Like, these are not expensive items, in 90 minutes. And talk about strategic. It's not even the book sale that he's after. The book sets you up to want to go and reach out to him with your business idea so he can co-venture with you. And that is where the tens and hundreds and even billions of dollars are for him in his business. And he's proving this model to be true. And I've not read that one, although I do have it on my hit list. I really did get a lot from an earlier book that he's written in this same kind of series called $100 Million Offers. And I listened to the audiobook of that, but like you with Made to Stick, now I want to go back and get the printed copy because he does them in this nice size and they're kind of like workbooks. I really like them. So, definitely worth checking out his books. Okay, my next book is another classic. This one was published back in 2012, and, I actually had never heard of it before in all this time. Sometimes you can just miss a whole kind of book that makes a big deal and you just don't hear it. So a colleague of mine suggested it just a little while back, and I gave it a read, and I thought it could be really relevant to our listeners, especially if you are in a service-based business where you don't deliver a physical, a tangible product. And the book is called Selling the Invisible, and it's by Harry Beckwith. And what I love about this is the specificity of his idea. It's a bit like Made to Stick with Chip and Dan Heath. They dug right specifically into one thing, and he's done the same here. He's specifically focused on the conundrum many of us who sell intangible services face, and that is, how do I make it real in the mind of my customer? Like, it's kind of invisible. How do I make the invisible visible? How do I differentiate? How do I add substance? How do I message? How do I prove my value? Now, it's actually a really short book. It's a really easy read. So if you're going, hey, guys, I've got not a lot of time this summer, or I just want a quick one, this would be a great one for you to start with. And while in some ways it's featuring ideas that you might have heard before, he's bringing them together in a really concise way and through this lens, through this focus of selling the invisible. And that's why I think it rates a mention here. And just a couple of quick highlights. The best thing that he says, so firstly, I just like the way he kind of just attunes our antenna to the fact that our services are invisible. He says you can't smell a tax return being prepared, You can't hold certain services in your hands. Like if I made you, a coffee table, you'd see that coffee table. But, if I'm providing a service, it's hard to see that as a tangible thing. And he says the core of service marketing is the service itself. Now, this is a really interesting, nuanced idea, and I'm going to say it again. The core of service marketing is the service itself. So he says before you do any marketing, before you try and talk about your service, first fix your service. The service is such a key part of your marketing. Now, we live in a rural area and there are not a lot of great restaurants around here. And there's a few little sort of towns where there tends to be restaurants that gather together, and we see so many of them open and close, within a short period of time. But there are a couple that are in quite remote regions that we will literally drive an hour to, who are thriving. Now, why is that? Because they fixed their service. They fixed their deliverable. They focused on what it was they were delivering, and they made it great. And, we will often say to each other, my husband, Mark, and I will say, you know what, it's not hard to succeed around here. You just have to be good. You just have to be good. So his whole premise is fix the service. That is actually a marketing activity. I really love this perspective. He talks about running surveys. And of course, we've got lots of experience here with running surveys. We've had Ryan Lebeck, who's written the book Ask, and is a great proponent of surveys. So we'll include a link to his episode. And he also talks about doing oral interviews. And we've also talked about that here on the show. And we'll give you a link to our episode on how to conduct avatar interviews in this show notes for today, because if you're interested in this, definitely become a student of how to do these surveys. It's an absolute game changer. But I love what he says, to let your clients set your standards. And he says the idea is to ask yourself, what could we do differently that would be extraordinary? Don't just create what the customer wants, create what the customer will love. And I think that's a question we can't ask ourselves, too many times. Keep focused on what will the customer love. And this was probably one of the best things in the book that I found. He said, really find out what the clients are actually buying. Doctors think someone is buying their expertise. They come in and they're buying my service, my doctor skills. But the expertise, when you sell a service that involves expertise, guess what? The expertise is expected. If you sell a service, your customer is buying a relationship. And this was the extract I wanted to read. In most professional services, you are not selling expertise because your expertise is assumed and because your prospect cannot intelligently evaluate your expertise anyway. Instead, you are selling a relationship. And in most cases, that is where you need the most work. Too many people are focused on the widgets and the whats and the hows and the 17 steps, and they completely miss the relationship. So go check out the book. There is so much other good stuff in there, but that's a little taster, and it's a nice quick read, Suzi.
I love it. It is going on the Audible account today. I love it. And I love that quote that you just shared with us. Definitely worth checking out. So the next book that I want to talk about is one that I loved so much. I thought it had such an important message for small business owners that I bought a copy for every single one of our Her Business Network members as part of our book club. So 3 to 4 times a year, more often 3, we send out a book to every single member. And this book is chosen on its relevance to growing and scaling a business, and whether that is something practical like marketing or whether it's around mindset. And this book actually fits into both. It's also a book that we did a deep dive into with our masterminders over the most recent in-person meeting that we had in Sydney. And that book is 10x is easier than 2x, or 10 times is easier than 2 times. And maybe you've heard that idea before, 10xing your business. This book has been so powerful. A lot of the books we choose, I know, are really loved by our members. This one has had this like fundamental shift in the way that people think. As I mentioned, we studied it also at our mastermind. So when it comes to marketing, why are we suggesting this book? Because for many of us, in order to get the revenue that we want, we need to start by shifting our thinking to going from incremental growth over years. When we think, this year I want to grow my business, often we'll think about adding a resource or two or working that much harder. But what if your goals are to go from 400 to 4,000 members? Or you're charging $100, but you want to be able to charge $10,000 for a service? There are times where you really need to do something drastically different rather than making incremental improvements or just working harder. And so this idea of 10xing is both a mental game and what it is that you do in your business. Because you might think, oh, sure, I like this idea of 10x, but I can't work 10 times harder. I'm already spent. And that's the gold about this book. It's about growth without doing more. The book is by Dan Sullivan, who's considered one of the world's leading coaches for high successful entrepreneurs, and also Dr. Benjamin Hardy, and also a quite well-known and really respected writer. And their premise is that 10xing your growth is actually easier than 2xing. And this can be very confusing, right? Because we think 10x, that's got to be a whole lot more work. So they say that 10x is not the outcome. It's about this counterintuitive process that you can apply to exponential growth. And it is really about 10xing what they call their most important freedoms, 10xing your time, your money, right? A lot of us are sort of listening out to, how do I 10x my money? But they're also about your relationships, 10xing your purpose. And they give you their process on how to do that. And as I said, the book bounces between how you need to think in order to 10x your business, but also what you need to be doing and not doing inside of your business. So how does this relate to your marketing? As I said, often we see businesses growing very slowly, a few more followers, a few more emails, a few more people on our email list. But what if we want radical change? To make those big shifts, we cannot grind our way to that big success. We need to find a new way to do it. So if you're getting 4 people in a course and you want 40, or if you want to, get 10 times the number of people on your email list or 10 times the number of leads, you need to do something different. And that's what this book is about. So Michelle, I know that you also had this book, but so Michelle and I go away and we go, okay, what books are we going to feature in this episode? And we both had this one on our list.
We sure did. And that is really a sign that a book is a must read when we've both listed it. So instead of picking another book, we thought it was worthwhile actually mentioning this fact just to really underline the importance of this book. We've often read the books that each other are recommending, but we both wanted to list this book just to convey what an important read we think it is. And Suzi, you've done a great job conveying the essence of the book, so I won't really repeat that. I just wanted to mention a nuance that we shared with our masterminders recently. We really dug deep into this at our last in-person meeting, and it was really thinking about this interplay between 10x and 2x. Now, obviously, this book is kind of, we understand the job this book's doing. It's being contentious, and it's really attracting attention with the idea that 10x is easier than 2x, right? It's being kind of contrarian. Hang on, wouldn't 2x be easier than 10x? No, 10x is easier than 2x. And in some ways, they spend the entire book really proving that point, which is what you would expect. They've done their job, right? But they kind of downplay 2x while they're shouting the merits of 10x. And I think that's an important thing to do for the premise of the book. We needed to be shaken out of our incremental thinking that a lot of us have by reading this book. But I wanted to also speak to the importance of 2x, something we talk a lot about on this show, like the power of consistent action over time, the power of compound interest. Like if you get 1 cent today, we've all seen the math on this, and you double it tomorrow, and then you double it the next day, and you double it the next day, within 30 days, you started with 1 cent and all you did was double it each day. Within 30 days, you've got $5,368,709.12. Consistent incremental action can become exponential. It's this idea of rinse and repeat that we've spoken about on the show such a lot. It's very powerful. So I love this book. I love shaking it. I feel like it grabbed me on both shoulders and shook me and said, Michelle, 10x is easier than 2x. Do some more 10x, you know. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I know our mastermind has found this really useful when we talked about this idea that there are periods of time when you need to be in 2x mode, consolidating growth, making incremental improvements, rinsing and repeating, optimizing, building team, building competency, creating systems. They are all necessary foundations for then making that next big 10x leap. You know, and what the book is saying, we're not making enough of those leaps. We're just puddling around, making life hard for ourselves. And I agree with that. But we need that 2x. I'm just championing the 2x a little bit alongside the 10x, because when we make that big 10x leap, then we need another period of 2x where we consolidate, grow, rinse, repeat. And I actually think that's what you see in the book in many of the stories they tell. The examples they're sharing aren't 10xing 24/7. They're taking a big 10x move and then they're consolidating before their next 10x move. But they're taking 10x moves. That's the important thing. So what I love about the 10x book is that I think we're not doing enough 10x thinking and not taking enough 10x action. So instead of just feeling like I've got to 10x every 5 minutes and just be exhausted, think about that upward graph kind of looking more like steps, a big 10x and then a bit of a plateau of 2x while you just incrementally consolidate, get yourself into another great position to 10x. So that's kind of what I wanted to add to that book, but loved it. Go read it.
Love it. And just to your point there, it's like recognizing, and that's one of the things that we can do objectively with our masterminders and say, okay, that's enough 2xing. You need to do something radically different, you know, and really holding the space for people to be able to make those bigger leaps that might feel riskier, but are going to get them to that next level in their marketing. So there you have our 2024 content marketing book recommendations. They were Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, Made to Stick, a wonderful classic by Chip and Dan Heath, $100 Million Leads, How to Get Strangers to Want to Buy Your Stuff by Alex Hormozi, Selling the Invisible, which I'm definitely picking up a copy of, by Harry Beckwith, and the wonderful, and I think it'll be a classic too, is The 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. We'll list all these, of course, in the free download, which I'll mention in just a moment. So we have been putting together these recommended reading lists for a number of years. So you'll get the benefit of the books that we've recommended before, which we think are pretty essential reading for content marketers, and we'll be adding in the books that we mentioned here today. So this is something you definitely want to get your hands on. It's got over 50 book recommendations, and they're all categorized. So content marketing, ideas and creativity, business and mindset. It's a really valuable resource, and it's free from us to you as a gift. So you're going to find that, let me find the link. You're going to find that over at herbusiness.com/bestbooks2024, herbusiness.com/bestbooks2024. Michelle, anything you want to say before we go today?
I've loved this episode. I love it every year. I'm excited to see what new books we learn about in the new year. We'll be sharing those. We would love to hear what books you've been reading. And also, if you read any of the books on our recommended reading list, head over to our Facebook page. Just look for Content Sales on Facebook and talk to us. Tell us, what did you think?
Yeah, so Content Sales Podcast, that's where you'll find us on Facebook. Once again, that checklist that you want to download is at herbusiness.com/bestbooks2024. Very excited to support you this year any way that we can. Remember, over on our Facebook page, you can ask us questions anytime, any sort of marketing questions. We are there for you, and keep listening. If you don't already subscribe to the show, this would be a really good time to click that follow button wherever you are listening so that you get the next episode as soon as it's available. Here's to an incredible year ahead. Michelle, you're awesome.
You too.
Thanks for listening. Bye for now.